All right. Good evening, everybody. You are here for the convening of the Cottonwood Mayor and City Council of the City of Cottonwood for presentation of proclamations, awards, and introduction of new city employees to be held on February 19th, 2019 at 5:30 p.m. And this evening we just have one proclamation, and it is proclaiming February 25th to March 2nd, 2019 as Stand With Me, Be Drug Free Week. I'm pleased today to be joined by Councilmember Holtz, Councilmember Matthews, and Vice Mayor Henry this evening. So thanks to you all for being here. I'll go ahead and read this, and I believe we have Commander Braxton, is that correct? Or both commanders? You're a commander, aren't you, Braxton?
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad I got that right. It's always a good thing when I get that right. Okay. So I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. You all can come up afterwards and say a few words. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Great, all right. So, whereas Matt Force has proclaimed February 25th through March 2nd, 2019 to be Stand Free With Me, Be Drug Free Week, and whereas the City of Cottonwood embraces a vision of a healthy, vibrant, and strong community for children, youth, families, and people of all ages, and celebrates the fact that a majority of people do not abuse drugs and alcohol, and whereas the City of Cottonwood recognizes that youth prevention is essential based on the fact that 9 of 10 people who struggle with substance use disorders began using substances as a teenager, and whereas knowing that families are adversely affected by illegal drug use, including work problems, legal problems, mental health problems, physical illness, addiction, accidents, accidental death, economic loss, child abuse, destruction of families, driving while impaired, and crimes against persons and property. And whereas the City of Cottonwood would like to commend and pay tribute to all of its citizens who choose to be free of illegal drug use, now therefore I, Tim Alinsky, Mayor of the City of Cottonwood, do hereby proclaim February 25th, March 2nd, to March 2nd, 2019 to be Stand With Me, Be Drug Free Week, and encourage citizens to participate in the celebration of a drug-free, healthy community by participating in planned events, activities, and displays. I'm sure the two commanders will go into more detail on that. Thanks for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. So Stand With Me, Be Drug Free Week. I'd like to recognize a couple members of the steering committee that are also in the audience today for Matt Force. And we're accepting this on behalf of Marilyn Fowler, Executive Director of Matt Force. And Stand With Me, Be Drug Free Week is a time to celebrate why you're drug free. So if you have a reason why you're drug free, Matt Force would love to see those reasons why. If you can send your email to Matt Force with a little note of why you're drug free, and she'd be happy to share those and promote that around the county. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council, and representatives here. Again, one of the neat things about the poster that you see that Commander McCooch is holding is that truly it's not just enforcement, but it's the educational component that we celebrate as well, that we know the majority of our citizens are not engaging or using drugs, and so the best we can do as a city, community, as a county as a whole to identify and recognize those education efforts. That's the third method, even from a law enforcement perspective, is educating from the youth all the way up to our adults, even those that may need an occasional reminder or two. But we prefer education and the awareness that this is truly what we stand for, is to stand with me and be drug free. So, thank you. Very much.
Okay, well that ends this meeting. It's a short one, but please stick around. More exciting things to come at 6 o'clock. Meeting of the City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Arizona to be held February 19, 2019 at 6 p.m. If we could please have the Deputy Clerk take the roll.
Councilmember Althouse.
Here.
Councilmember Matthews.
Here.
Councilmember Holtz.
Here.
Vice Mayor Henry.
Here.
Mayor Alinsky.
Here.
And Councilmember Howergy is absent.
Very good. Please stand and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, up next on the agenda is a brief summary of current events by the mayor, city council, and/or city manager. The public body does not propose, discuss, deliberate, or take any legal action on any matter brought up during this summary. Do we have anyone here tonight in council to report anything?
I do.
Please.
I just wanted to let the public know that on Wednesday, February 27th, at Cottonwood Community School, I have to remember the new name, Healthy Families in the Cottonwood Community School and the American Legion Post 25 are having a Dr. Seuss Reading is Fun Day. It's at 4 o'clock at the school on Mingus Avenue in the 800 block courtyard. So public is invited.
All right.
And Vice Mayor Henry will be joining me in attending that event, and she's actually going to be reading a book to the children. So we'll see how well she can read Dr. Seuss.
No pressure.
All right. Anybody else have anything to report? No? Okay. City manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a few things going on. First, I'd like to announce, if you haven't heard, the Chamber of Commerce annual dinner for 2019 has been canceled for this Friday due to the snow forecast. So no dinner this Friday. So you can put away your tux and tie and save it for another weekend. Also, we invite people to join the Cottonwood Public Library for its 4th annual Verde Valley Comic Expo on Saturday, March 23rd from 10 to 5 at the Cottonwood Recreation Center's gymnasium. You'll get to meet local area comic book creators and cosplay guests. Proceeds go to the Cottonwood Bookmarks to help support Cottonwood's Public Library summer reading program. Also a reminder that the Brian Mickelson Memorial Run Walk will be Saturday, April 13th, beginning at 6 a.m. Go online to register, and I plan to run the half marathon, so if anybody from council would like to join me, feel free. Let me know, and we can practice together up those hills. We have a lot of meetings over the next couple of weeks. The library board will meet on Wednesday, February 20th at 5 at the public library. P&Z Commission on Monday, February 25th at 6 here in the chambers. Parks and Rec Commission will meet on Tuesday, February 26th at 5 p.m. at the Cottonwood Recreation Center. The Historic Preservation Commission is meeting on Wednesday, February 27th at 6 p.m. here in the chambers. And the Airport Commission is meeting on Wednesday, March 6th at 6 p.m. at the City Council chambers also. And that's all I have.
All right. We will move along then to presentations. And tonight we are honored to be receiving a check from the YAVAPAI-APACHE Nation for the Proposition 202 funding. We have with us Vice Chairman Larry Jackson. Good evening.
Good evening. Evening, Mayor, Council. I want to thank you for the time this evening. And of course, I am here from the YAVAPAI-APACHE Nation. I'm the Vice Chairman for the nation, and I am here to make a presentation. And the presentation really is a result of the Prop 202 back in 2002, which is an agreement to make a contribution to the state as well as local governments and municipalities based on the annual revenue from our casino. But with that said, I do want to thank the town of Cottonwood, the citizens of Arizona for supporting tribal government gaming, because it is very important to our tribal citizens by way of many different programs, our social services, our education, our health benefits, and the list goes on. But no doubt it's a partnership, and we're honored to be a part of that. The 2018 Arizona Department of Gaming report reported that $94,000 went into the state coffers for 2018, and the 88% of that is paid out to various programs for the state: problem gambling, Arizona Department of Gaming, Instructional Funds Improvement Fund, Trauma and Emergency Services, Arizona Wildlife Conservation Fund, and Tourism Fund. And so we're just honored to be in partnership with the state in many different ways. But with that said, and without further ado, I'd like to present you with a check, you and the town council.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask us all to come down and have our picture taken.
On behalf of the chairwoman, Jane Russell-Winicki, our tribal council, and the citizens of the YAVAPAI-APACHE Nation, we want to thank you for our partnership in the local communities. And with that said, I want to present to you, Mayor and Council, a check for $18,050.50. 50 cents is real important.
We're going to use every last dime. Thank you. Push. Okay. Just so the public knows, we're going to try to use that money to fund a crosswalk beacon at the Cottonwood Community School. So we appreciate the funds very much. Thank you. Okay, up next is call to the public. This portion of the agenda is set aside for the public to address the council regarding an item that is not listed on the agenda for discussion. However, the council cannot engage in discussion regarding any item that is not officially listed on the agenda for discussion and/or action. I believe we do have a representative here tonight from Congressman Gosar's office, Ms. Penny Pugh.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thanks so much for allowing me a couple of minutes. I just wanted to introduce myself for those that are new and haven't met me before. And I'm Congressman Gosar's District Director in Intergovernmental Affairs, and you'll find me traveling throughout the district and available anytime you need some help on federal issues. You need some connections at the state, we're happy to help you with that as well. We are planning to do some remote office hours, some mobile office hours, since it's quite a drive from Prescott for some of your folks here, and I've talked to the mayor earlier today about having one of my staff members come out here. So look for that in the near future. We'll post that where you normally post yours. Any federal issues, VA, Social Security, anything that you run into red tape or you hear someone that's running into it, let us help with that. We're happy to step in and see what we can do. And I appreciate it and look forward to working with each of you on federal issues that might come up.
Very good. Well, thanks for taking the time to come out and visit with us.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you have business cards?
I do.
Could,
I'll
get 'em.
I'll give them to Mr. Corbin.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there anyone else here tonight that would like to address the council? Okay, we'll go ahead and close.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I could make an announcement. I just learned that we are not broadcast live right now. I just wanted to make you and the public aware, but we are recording it and people can watch it at a later date.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so then we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the strategic retreat of January 11, 2019, special meeting of January 31, 2019, and the regular meeting of February 5th, 2019.
Move to approve the minutes.
Okay, I'll second that. So Councilmember Althouse made the motion, Mayor seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. And we roll into unfinished business. We have a couple items, well, more than a couple tonight. 3 items under unfinished business. First up is ordinance number 657, amending the city's zoning ordinance by amending section 418 C1 zone light commercial by amending section D property development standards 5 minimum rear yard, second and final reading. Evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Scott Ellis, Planning and Zoning. Second and final reading for ordinance 657 for section 418 D5 C1 light zone. It's just adding side yards to an ordinance you guys had already approved back in December. And at the time, side yards currently have 0-foot setback, except for on a corner lot abutting a street. So at the time we originally did it, it didn't seem like an issue, but then we have people coming in with projects that could potentially benefit from the same requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions, concerns?
No? Okay. All right, and I would entertain a motion. Well, I should ask if there's anyone from the public tonight that would like to comment on this. No.
motion to approve ordinance number 657.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Holst made the motion, Vice Mayor Henry seconded it. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Althouse,
Yes.
Councilmember Holtz,
Yes.
Councilmember Matthews,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Henry,
Yes.
Mayor Linsky,
Yes,
and motion carried.
very good. Deputy Clerk, please read ordinance number 657 by title only.
Ordinance number 657, an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, amending the city's zoning ordinance by amending section 418C1 zone, light commercial by amending section D, property development standards 5, minimum rear yard. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, next is ordinance number 658, amending the city zoning ordinance by amending section 420 CR zone commercial residential district by amending section D, property development standards 5, minimum rear yard, second and final reading.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Second final reading for ordinance 658. On your recommendation, when the C1 was in front of you, to look at doing the CR zone within the arts, culture, and entertainment district. So that's what this one does. Allows up to 0 setbacks on the front, rear, and side on a case-by-case basis in the CR zone.
All right, any questions from council?
No.
Anyone in the audience tonight to speak on this issue? All right.
I move to approve ordinance number 658.
Second.
Okay, Vice Mayor made the motion, Councilmember Matthews seconded it. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Althouse,
Yes.
Councilmember Holtz,
Yes.
Councilmember Matthews,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Henry,
Yes.
Mayor Linsky,
Yes.
and motion carried.
All right, please read ordinance number 658 by title only.
Ordinance number 658, an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, amending the city zoning ordinance by amending section 420 CR zone, commercial residential district by amending section D, property development standards 5, minimum rear yard. Mr. Mayor.
All right. Last but not least, ordinance number 659, amending the city zoning ordinance by amending section 404, general provisions by amending section G, 6A, swimming pools, second and final reading.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Second reading, final reading of ordinance 659 to allow 5-foot setback on pools from the main structure. With all the newer subdivisions, a lot of the lots are smaller these days than what you historically have seen. Some of these property owners want to install pools, and the current setback of 10 feet just makes it very, very difficult, sometimes impossible. Checking other jurisdictions, fire marshal and building official don't have any issues, so we'd like to move forward with reducing that setback to allow more pools.
All right. Questions from council? Members of the public?
I'll move to approve ordinance number 659.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Matthews made the motion and Althouse seconded it. Deputy Clerk, please take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Althouse.
Yes.
Councilmember Holtz.
Yes.
Councilmember Matthews.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Henry.
Yes.
Mayor Linsky.
Yes.
And motion carried.
All right, please read ordinance number 659 by title only.
Ordinance number 659, an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, amending the city zoning ordinance by amending section 404, general provisions by amending section G6A, swimming pools. Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ellis. Okay, up next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The following items are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the council, and they will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence. So we have 8 items tonight on the consent agenda. I'll go ahead and read them out loud. Item 1 is resolution number 2983, authorizing the acceptance of a right-of-way from Spectrum Healthcare Group, Inc. at the northeast corner of Willard and Cottonwood Streets. Item 2 is resolution number 2985, authorizing the acceptance of an easement for the construction, operation, and maintenance of a public water line. Item 3 is acceptance of temporary water line construction and access easement across APN 406-04-061B. Owner is Martin Galvez for the construction of a new potable water line. Item 4 is resolution number 2984, authorizing the acceptance of a water line easement from GM Fratelli LLC. Item 5, acceptance of a temporary utility construction easement from GM Fratelli LLC. Item 6, resolution number 2986, authorizing the the acceptance of a water line easement from the Cottonwood Ditch Association. Item 7 is special event liquor license application submitted by Laura Jones, applicant for Friends of the Verde River for an event scheduled for April 26, 2019 at Dead Horse Ranch State Park located at 675 Dead Horse Ranch Road. And item 8, contract amendment with Clear Creek and Associates for completion of the underground storage facility and water storage permit applications, modeling and analysis work. Any council member like an item pooled for discussion? Any member of the public that would like an item pooled for discussion? Okay.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Althouse made the motion and Holst seconded it. Deputy Clerk, please. No, we don't need roll call vote. Never mind. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda is approved. And we need to read resolution number 2983, 2985, 2984, 2986 by title only, please.
Resolution number 2983, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, YAVAPAI County, Arizona, authorizing the acceptance of right-of-way for the construction, improvement, operation, and maintenance of a public road, street, or highway, together with the right to authorize, permit, and license the use thereof for utilities or other public purposes. Resolution number 2985, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, authorizing the acceptance of an easement for the construction, improvement, operation, and maintenance of a public utility, together with the right to authorize, permit, and license the use thereof. Resolution number 2984, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, authorizing the acceptance of an easement for the construction, improvement, operation, and maintenance of a public utility, together with a right to authorize, permit, and license the use thereof. And resolution number 2986, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, authorizing the acceptance of a perpetual easement for the construction, improvement, operation, and maintenance of a public utility, together with the right to authorize, permit, and license the use thereof. Mr. Mayor.
Nice work. All right, we move into new business, and it's the moment we've all been waiting for. It is the comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018.
I know it's such stimulating reading. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Kirsten Lennon, Financial Services Director for the City of Cottonwood. Tonight, I'm going to introduce you to Vanessa Burke and Andrew Roth, who are part of the Poon Group. We have had a contract with Lombard and Associates. It's a 3-year contract. And Poon Group has acquisitioned the Lombard and Associates, and they've fully taken over. So now they are in charge of the audit. They have a presentation for you, and you're going to come up and get that. And I have copies for people if they would like the presentation if people want it.
Very good. Welcome to Cottonwood.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Thank you. I'm pleased to be here tonight. And to my side, I've got Andrew Roth. He's the senior manager on the engagement and really has been here pretty much day to day. I'm the office managing partner for our Arizona office. I know last year I spoke briefly about it, but the Poon Group has 5 offices. We're headquartered out of Santa Ana. I'm the new resident, I would say, of Arizona. I moved here over a year ago from California. I left all the snow, I noticed, to come here for more snow. So my California ways, I rented an SUV to get up here today, but I think I don't need it till tomorrow. No chain control, at least tonight. So we're pleased to be here tonight. We are going to present to you the audit for fiscal year ending June 30th of 2018. And I looked at your agenda packet, which I think it was really voluminous this year because our CAFR was in, the city's CAFR is in there. And it's about a 160-page document. So all of you've read it before tonight. And so I know you'll probably have lots of questions at the end. But what we do is a brief presentation, kind of walk you through really the highlights of the report. Andrew's going to do a piece of the presentation, I'll do a piece of it, and then at the end we'll open it up to questions in case, as you were getting through that large document, you have any further questions. We'll talk a little bit about goals tonight, is talk about what our scope of work entails for the audit, our annual required communications. I'll have Andrew talk about that, our results of our audit, Management's responsibilities, which is for the document itself as opposed to our responsibilities as the auditors. The approach to the audit, final audit results. We're going to give a brief financial overview of the CAFR, which we did something similar to that last year for those of you that were here. Talk about some financial indicators and key pension and OPEB information for the city. And then we always like to lead in the presentation talking about new accounting standards. Our standards in which we report financial information for the city is under the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. Different from private industry, they are the governing body that sets the standards for what's contained within the document and guide all the accounting underlying your fund financial statements and government-wide financial statements. So scope of work for our audit for 17-18, as the Poon Group, we were engaged to perform an audit of the CAFR itself. The CAFR is a comprehensive annual financial report. I've got a slide on what that means. It's different than what's required by GASB. GASB only requires a basic financial statement for the audit, but you go one step above that. You actually go and try to achieve a Government Finance Officers Association award. And you'll see you had the award for excellence in financial reporting bound into the document for last year. And they're always a year in arrears. And so really what we're auditing is not only the basic financial statements, but we're contemplating the GFOA filing for the city. We also performed a single audit under what's called the Uniform Guidance. You are the recipient of federal awards. You have that document in your packet. A single audit is required when the city receives and expends, really expends more than $750,000 in federal awards in any 1 year. And what that does is that kicks us into requiring to do some compliance audits under the single audit. Andrew is our resident expert in our firm. He's received an advanced certification in single audits, so if you have any really detailed questions, he can answer all of those. We have 2 other reports required by statutory regulations. One is the annual expenditure limitations report, which you adopt as part of your budget, and then the Highway User Revenue Fund report. And that's really contemplates the use of highway user revenue funds for street and other services. We do like to bring to your attention any other non-audit services that we are involved with the city, because as you know, under INRA and PCAOB rules for publicly traded companies, if we have other services that we provide outside of audit, it can pose an independence conflict. And so we like to bring those to the City Council's attention so that you're aware that we did assist management in preparing the financial statements this year and the disclosures in the book, but we have to assess and build safeguards for that so that we're not auditing our own work. And that's because you've hired Kirsten to take responsibility for those financial statements. She's the designated person with the skills, knowledge, and expertise for those. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Andrew, for required communications.
As part of required by our public standards annually by the AICPA, we're required to give out the SAS, what's known as the SAS 114 letter, for those charged with governance. So in essence, if you're not going to read the whole 160-page document, this is kind of like the highlights right here. So in essence, we'll go over the audit responsibility, which we all cover a couple slides after this one. Some significant accounting policies are also discussed. Those are typically it's the more like will be your pension or fair market value measurements, OPEB, and the OPEB is the new OPEB accounting, which for the city was in Arizona. The OPEB is paid as part of like the PERS pension as like an additional cost, so it's a little bit different than you see in other like areas. But so yeah, that was implemented this year. Some significant estimates, the fair value of investments, the depreciation on capital assets, as well as the assumptions for OPEB and the pension liability. We also go into some significant disclosures, which your note 1 is a pretty good one to look at. At the end of note 1, we always do add the implemented standards as well as the upcoming standards, so it kind of gives you a snapshot of what happened during the year and what's going to happen. We actually have dates that says when it's going to be applicable, so you'll get an idea of when those will take into effect. Also, note 6, excess consideration provided for acquisition. It's your goodwill purchase of the water companies. 10 is your pension plans and your OPEB. You combine those since they're both kind of in the same plan. Also the prior period adjustment, which we had to make for the OPEB, and then also the commitments and contingencies, any outstanding liabilities or going forward things that the city will have to fund. So a result, there were noted in the letter, there were no significant difficulties encountered during the audit. It was a pretty smooth audit. We did not have any disagreements with management, and we also did not consult with any other outside auditors. So some other results, as part of, there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, internal controls, or financial reporting or compliance. As noted last year, there was 2 findings noted, I believe, and those findings were corrected this year. And we were able to kind of get some of those things, the city was able to fix those and get everything adjusted correctly, so we were able to have those be corrected last year. There are no material irregularities discovered. And then there is other matters, just the adjustment made to the prior period, the retroactive application for a net OPEB liability, and I believe the prior period adjustment, which would be an adjustment for the June 30 as of July 1, 2017. June 30, 2017. And the change was, it was pretty small. It was $77,000 for governmental activities and $403 for business type activities. And the reason for that is that the plans for OPEB under PSPR safety and under the miscellaneous plans they're pretty well funded. Some you'll notice go between OPEB asset and OPEB liability, depending on which one, because they have the health benefit supplement as well as the long-term disability. And so yeah, those will, they're smaller numbers, but we figured they were important to put in there because it was something new for this year. So a little bit about management's responsibilities required for the audit. Management's responsible for the financial statements, taking the ownership of the financial statements and representing everything in the financial statements. They're also responsible to present the financial statements in accordance with accounting principle generally accepted in the United States of America, also known as GAAP, US GAAP. Responsible to adopt sound accounting policies, establish and maintain internal controls over financial reporting and compliance, as well as provide evidence supporting the amounts and disclosures in financial statements that happens during the audit. And also, management's responsible to prevent and detect fraud. As for the auditors, for our responsibilities, we are responsible to perform the audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America and standards applicable financial audits contained in government auditing standards, also known as GAS, and uniform guidance, which is in essence the single audit, the federal funding requirements. As stated in the last slide, so we are responsible to communicate with those charged with governments. That's the SASMA 14 language, whatever. During the course of the audit, we are responsible to assess audit risk and internal controls over financial reporting and compliance. In the reporting process, we determine the fair presentation of the financial statements and material compliance. Then we are responsible to render opinions, and those opinions are the ones on the reports that were noted in previous slides. And I'll also issue recommendations to managements if we noted anything. Last year we had the findings, and this year nothing rose to that level. Next slide. So this is a little bit like the approach to the audit here. So that's our audit. I don't know if you can see that. It's hard to.
Do you have it in your material? Is it easier to see that if you go up a little? Okay. It's a fine print.
Hope they enlarge that next time, maybe. So the plan. So in essence, it's 4 stages. You got your planning, which is the very beginning part of the audit when we get the engagement letter signed, and come to an understanding between the city and ourselves of responsibilities. Then that typically happens around May. We'll do our initial assessment of the financial systems, policies, procedures. We'll note any prior year findings or any issues noted that we probably want to build into the current year into the process. And then we'll come out for interim. Typically, we'll start that process in about May, and that's when we come and we do walkthroughs. We do tests of internal controls for the main transaction cycle, like your revenues and your expenditures, as well as the financial reporting. So during the interim process, we also get with the city to discuss any ongoing issues to kind of get an understanding of the operating environment, if there's any changes in the current year, any adjustments we would want to make to the audit approach based on those changes. We'll perform preliminary analytical procedures and establish expectations and assignments for year-end testing and the time frame for the year-end testing. So that was made. Now year-end typically, it's about November is when we come out for year-end, for at least for this year. I think we might move it up. I forget to a little bit to get the report in December versus just December, January would be the hope. So during the year-end process, that's when we conduct a substandard audit procedures and significant account balances, transactions. We do specific procedures to address fraud risk noted during the interim or in the planning risk assessment procedures. We'll confirm significant balances. We'll confirm with the attorneys if there's anything, any issues or contingencies. Then we'll also do our uniform guidance testing, the testing for the single audit. So, and that's testing, when we do the single audit, so you know, we test compliance, and then we test internal controls over the compliance. So it's kind of like a dual part. So we do both the internal controls and the actual compliance. It's pretty important. So then we do hold periodic progress meetings to make sure everyone's meeting their own deadlines and we can get everything issued on time. So the reporting period, that's when we start to draft the copies of the financial statements, any AUP reports and compliance reports for management's review. We prepare the single audit report, which consists of both the report on internal controls over financial reporting on compliance and other matters based on audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government accounting standards, also known as GAS. Then we also do the report on compliance for each major federal program on internal control and over compliance required by the uniform guidance and on the CFA schedule, which actually it's a financial statement in that report in essence. And we also, during the process, we go through a multiple level review process. You get seniors starting the draft process, and I've reviewed, and then we get multiple level partner review. Then we also have an EQR, which is our engagement quality reviewer, that does a final review to make sure we're in accordance with AICPA. So then we prepare that SAS 114 letter discussed previously, and then also if there's any management letter comments, we also add those, and then we will present the final report to the council, which is right now. So on to the audit results. So the main audit result for the CAFR, an unmodified opinion. This would be a clean opinion. This basically states the financial statements are fairly presented in all material aspects. Significant accounting policies have been consistently applied. Estimates are reasonable, and disclosures are reflected in the financial statements properly. As for the HERF report, the Highway User Revenue Fund, we noted that the city was in compliance with all statutory requirements under that requirement. And then also on the annual expenditure limitation report, we also noted that the city's in compliance with any statutory requirements under that report. I think I'll give it back to Vanessa now.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So with that, just before I go into the financial overview, are there any questions on our audit approach, kind of responsibilities for the audit, fraud, and any of that? Let me, go ahead.
I think we're good. Yeah, thank you. No questions.
No questions. Okay, very good. So I'm going to quickly run through a financial overview of the CAFR. Really, I'm going to follow along in the order of the CAFR. We'll go through the government-wide, the general fund, and then some other key factors. Really, the CAFR is composed of various sections. So our audit encompasses all of this. We issued our independent auditor's report. It's about a 2-page report, as Andrew described. That's the important report. That's really our main responsibility, is to issue that. And we issued a clean opinion, unqualified, on the city's financial statement. If you were to read anything in the 160-page document besides what we pointed out in the separate 114 letter, I would recommend you take a look at management's discussion and analysis. And this is really management's opportunity to really discuss the events between the 2 years and what has gone on in the city, and really give, really paint the story or tell the story different from what's required by GASB. It is unaudited, but we do look and make sure that the numbers are consistent with the financial information, but it is a required supplementary information under GASB. I talked earlier about basic financial statements. These are required under the accounting principles, government-wide financial statements, the fund financial statements, and the notes to the basic financial statements. Last is required supplementary information. This is really where you're going to see a lot of the detail on your pensions and your OPEB, as well as your budget versus actual for those funds that are required to legally adopt a budget. That is unaudited information, but we do compare that information and look. I mean, we're always looking at all the information to make sure it's consistent. Last is supplementary information. We do apply limited audit procedures to that. Not all funds are rolled up into the front of the book, and those that are combined together as non-major funds are included in the back of the book. The first statement is the government-wide financial statement, and most of you know that governmental accounting is unique in that it has really two different methods of accounting. One is full accrual basis financial statements, and the other is modified accrual. So the fund statements that are governmental fund types are modified accrual basis. Government-wide financial statements paint the picture of the city on a long-term basis. It's full accrual. It's pulling in all your long-term assets and all of your long-term liabilities. Different from your general fund presentation, which is really a short-term measurement focus of assets and liabilities as opposed to a long-term view. So this is really the overall view of the city, including those long-term assets and liabilities. So this would include all of your capital assets. So you can see that your assets on a government-wide basis in 2017 as compared to 2018 declined by about $8.7 million. And that's really related to transfers for the capital project related to the wastewater reclamation plant. The other two accounts, deferred outflows and inflows, I'll talk about those specifically. Those you see changes in them, they've declined between the 2 years, and those are really where the change in assumptions in your actuarial valuation for your pension as well as your OPEB liability flow through those amounts. And really the main item that's sitting in your deferred outflow of resources are typically contributions to the pension plan, as well as we would have the excess assets for goodwill, I think, is in there. Liabilities declined from $51.5 million down to $48.9 million, approximately $3 million change. Typically, that's your debt service payments you're making between years, and you see that going down. Overall, net position declined by about $6.4 million. And we know that part of that is really the booking of pension costs in the current year. We know that pension costs are increasing, and so part of the change in your pension liability that's happening year to year for your unfunded liability is going to be impacting your unrestricted fund balance. So the majority of that 7.8 to the 15.4 million is really attributable to having unfunded pension liabilities. I've got a couple slides on those later. Overall, you can see between years that your program revenues have maintained stability between them, really only an increase of about $843,000. Those are really your charges for services, any of the operating grants or capital grants and contributions that you might receive from federal or state funding. And so that's maintained relative stability. Expenses are $30.1 million. They're down by about $3.9 million to $26.1 million. And a lot of that is conscientious effort on the part of the city to control costs. You can see also general revenues, which is really where your taxes are coming in, your state share of taxes. You can see that that's maintained stability between the 2 years of about $18.3 million to $18.7 million. And then you'll see we've got a transfer amount coming out of the governmental activities of about $8.7 million, and that's money that's being transferred to fund the wastewater improvements that were constructed over in the enterprise fund, because this is really just the governmental activities piece. You'll see a prior period adjustment of $77,000. That's the impact of the recognition of your OPEB, or outstanding other post-employment health benefit obligations. And it's a small number, but consistent with the industry. Everybody booked them this year. I've seen the numbers a lot larger than that rolling through the financial statements, in some cases pretty alarming. So I'm glad yours is not large. Business type activities. These are essentially water, wastewater activities, and you can see assets increased from $58.3 million to $68.4 million, and that was a year-end transfer of that $8.7 million that I talked about previously to fund the construction of that project. Deferred outflow and inflow, it's going to have the same impact in enterprise funds, because your employees that work in the enterprise also participate in the pension as well as the OPEB plans, and so those changes are very minor, but we can see that there's some impact as a result of changes in assumptions for that liability. Liabilities declined from $30.8 million down to $29.2 million, total change of about $1.6 million. Construction's ended on that project. Wind down of that project is happening, so we don't see outstanding vendor payments at the end of 18 like we saw at the end of 17. You see net investments in your capital assets have gone up by about $6.2 million. That's mostly related to the plant. Restricted assets is really a reclassification in this year of cash with fiscal agent. So within your $6.8 million, we've got cash with fiscal agent that's sitting there for debt service of about $7.5 million. So we're showing that in a separate restricted line. And then overall, you see your unrestricteds decline by a small amount of $2.1 million. The good news, though, by doing that transfer is you did not take on any new debt to build that replacement of the plant. And so that transfer is going to fund it, but you'll see it flow through on one of the other slides here. This is a statement of net position, statement of activities for the business type activities. This is all the transactions that happened during the year for water and wastewater. You can see a slight increase in charges for services for usage of about $500,000 there, nothing major. Costs have maintained itself, and so overall your net cost of services only increased by about $159,000 between 17 and 18. General revenues have declined slightly. You'll see that transfer of $8.7 million coming in to fund those costs, and a small prior period adjustment related to recognition of OPEB of $400. This is the city's general fund, so if it's not classified as another fund within the city's CAFR, the general fund is really the collect-all of all your operations for your other activities that are not specifically identified. And so you can see your assets here decreased from about 6.2 to 4. Liabilities remained relatively stable. Overall fund balance declined by about $2 million. And again, that drop in fund balance is due to the transfer to the wastewater riverfront reclamation plant. General fund activities, so all activities during the year. Revenue, again, is relatively stable, $20.6 million or $7 million to $21.4 million. Expenditures have decreased or increased by about $900,000. Overall revenue over expenses, you have slightly greater loss, but only about $220,000. I think that's pretty good given current economics. And ultimately, the other financing sources, the $1.7 million is a use, and that's related to that transfer to the wastewater fund. Financial indicators and key pension information. So one of the things that we like to do is we like to show essentially back on one of the earlier slides on your governmental activities is what your cost of services is to support your governmental activities as it relates to revenue. And that's revenue, basically tax revenue. And essentially you're at about 87%. And so what that means is your tax revenues are covering your cost of services. Contrary to many other California cities that we see, that number is much greater, typically due to police and fire, which is about 60 to 70% of the budget, and ultimately you're having to make that up with charges for services, operating grants, and capital grants and contributions. But in your case, that number has actually come down. We've seen an improvement from the prior year of about 28%. We like to take a look at the unassigned fund balance for the general fund. One, because you've established a policy for reserves for your general fund, and we like to take a look at it between years and see how that has changed. And you can see that it's dropped by about 2.1 million over the annual expenditures. GFOA's best practice and city policies to maintain about 2 months worth of reserves. You're dropped below that this year, but again, it's a one-time use of fund balance. We never get alarmed as auditors when there's a one-time use of fund balance, as long as there's plans to replenish it and bring it back up to its established level. And that's really what that's for. It's the contingency to take into account when you have those uncertainties, like the wastewater treatment plant. You've got to fund those one-time costs that you didn't anticipate in the budget, and it happens that you've got kind of that rainy day fund set aside. But there should be, and you do have a policy in which that is rebuilt back up. So those would be essentially part of your budget discussions going forward. We have slides on GASB 68, which is our pension standards, and this is what accounts for pension costs. So all of us have heard and read in the news, pension liability. A.R.S. is your part of your participant as part of the cost sharing plan within A.R.S. Your net pension liability currently is booked using an 8% discount rate. That is the rate that the plan establishes and essentially discounts your unfunded liability back using that rate. And then your funding ratios are coming off of that during the year. Your funded status of your plan between the 2 years went from 67% to about almost nearly 70%. But what you can see clearly is if the A.R.S. was to adjust your discount liability, there's a sensitivity footnote in there, and that's now required under actuarial standards to disclose. You can see that your liability goes up substantially if it was to drop by 1%. So if the pension plan was to go in and say, you know, we're not earning 8% on our investments, which in all likelihood they were not on a long-term basis, and they start to ratchet that down, and we see this happening in California with CalPERS, then that unfunded liability balloons as does your share. And so it goes from 12.4 million to 16.1 million. Conversely, if they were to increase the investment rate to 9% and use that as their discount rate, your liability would drop from 12.4 million down to about 9.5 million. So the investment returns of those pension portfolios are really substantial, and your proportionate share of it is impacted as a result of those decisions that are made. For the PSPRS plan, this is the police, and this is an agent plan. And in this case, they actually, interestingly enough, use 7.4% as the ratio for their plan, a different set of investments. And in this case, your liability is 10.2 million. If it dropped down to 6.4 million, you'd be at around 12.7 million, as compared to going the other direction if investment returns were to hold and they ratcheted it up by a percentage point, you'd be at 8.2 million. Your funded status of the plan, and this plan is not as well funded as everyone is probably aware. You're at 34.8%. Last year, you funded a little bit more this year, 38.1%. PSPRS fire plan, very similar, better funded, same ratios, 7.4, 6.4, 8.4. You can see the changes there. 2.8 million is where you are booked as of today. 4.2 million would be a 1% change in a downward ratio, and 1.7 million would be upward, and you're funded around 68% now, 68.5%. This is the OPEB. Some people, I know as we went through concurring review, the concurring reviewer said, well, it's not material. It isn't. The amount of the health benefit is not material to you because it's really part of your contribution rate that you contribute to A.R.S. But we did book the amount, and you can see that the health benefit supplement is actually in a positive position, fully funded of 103.57%. whereas you also participate in A.R.S's long-term disability plan for your employees, and that's not as well funded. It's about 84.4%, which is actually really good. Very small numbers, nothing really alarming to be worried about. Schedule of net OPEB liability and assets. This is really the police and fire. You can see that the police plan has a net OPEB liability of $32,000, whereas I'm thinking in thousands, sorry. $32,000, whereas fire is actually, I got it backwards. Police is liability of $32,100, and fire is an asset in an asset position of $98.6 million. Actually, it's the other way. The brackets are in the back. The brackets are in the wrong direction. So let me back up. 32 million is the asset. It's 111.25% funded. That means you're in an asset position for police. Fire is 61%. You're in a liability. The brackets are wrong on the slide on the liability and assets. Apologize for that. But overall, you're at 87.6% funded. Implementation of new standards. So we just discussed previously GASB statement number 75. That was the OPEB standard that we implemented this year. The other standards, 81 through 86, really had no impact on the financial statements this year. Upcoming, which is exciting and interesting for accountants, is GASB's 83 through 90. The GASB is not stopping. They're also working right now on preliminary views of a new financial reporting standard. They have not looked at GASB 34, which is what your financials are based on, in, well, now it's 17 years. And so they're now doing a look at the usefulness of the report. My partner and I, Kim Poon, and I testified in front of GASB in that, and we also contribute to the preliminary views. But it's interesting to see where they're going. I don't see substantial changes happening with the new standard coming out. The ones that are on the horizon that may affect you are going to be leases and then fiduciary activities for 2020. Looks like next year, 2019, we get a break because we only have certain asset retirement obligations. So if you're not retiring assets, it's going to be easy street. We like that because we've been very busy the last 2 years with OPEB and pension in a row. So I think they timed them to give us 1 year break. And with that, that concludes my prepared remarks and Andrew's, and we'll both be ready to answer any questions you might have.
Very good, thank you. Do we have any questions? No questions? No.
I did, actually. Nobody else? Mine's really kind of a stupid question. Just, can you explain a little bit more about the retroactive adjustments and why those, so in conjunction, I guess, with the implementation of the new standards that we just saw and are looking at, are we going to be looking at similar retroactive adjustments for each of these standards as well?
Yeah, no. When GASB issues a new standard, they generally will do one of two things. They will say, you can implement the standard and it's retroactive application to the beginning of the year in which you implement. So in our case for this audit would be July 1 of 17. Or they do prospective application, which is going forward. We're going to make a change, we're going to prospectively implement it. In most cases, like 90%, there's always a retroactive application of the standard. And what that means is we take the adjustment that's made and we look at what the impact would have been at the beginning of the year had that standard been implemented through time. And so we adjust the fund balance in your case, or in it, because these are long-term liabilities, we adjusted the net position to account for those liabilities on the books of the city. What would that liability have been at the beginning of the year as opposed to the end of the year? So we book both beginning and end, but the total effect isn't taken into account at the end of 18. We take into account the effect at the beginning of the year. So when you did your pension, it was a much, much larger number that would have affected your net position.
Okay, that's helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I just had another question. Can you?
Yeah, please.
Can you just go into a little bit more detail about the effect if any, to us for the implementation of number 82 with the pension issues? I know you went over it fairly quickly, but as far as, here what we're seeing and then moving forward, what is the major impact to us?
So this standard at 82 was not a substantial standard that was implemented. It really clarified some of the original 67. It was really, I would consider it more of a clarifying standard as to how to do some of the accounting for the deferred inflow and outflow and the reporting, and that it was more, in essence, a clarifying standard to the original ones, which were 67 and 68. So 68 was a pension reporting standard. 67 dealt with the contribution side of the reporting standard.
Okay. So more just to provide guidance and not
more
new.
Clarity.
Okay.
Clarity.
And
No impact in your case.
And maybe this is premature and a question for next year, but you had mentioned that we really need to be on the lookout for 87 and 84, if I heard correctly, the fiduciary activities and the leases. Are you able to just touch briefly on maybe some things that, as we're maybe going through the budget process, are there things we need to be looking out for and discussing even now before we get there, or
yeah,
am I just off the mark?
Yeah, you only have the Fireman's Pension Trust Fund sitting in the fiduciary funds currently. We haven't evaluated the impact of it. I don't know, Kirsten, it's probably not going to have an impact because I think presently it meets the purpose of as the definition of fiduciary funds are defined. So I don't really believe that this standard is going to have a substantial change to what you see in front of you, and it won't have necessarily a budgetary impact per se, but you can talk on the budget because
the state is looking at passing a bill to allow us to use that alternative pension that we have to pay down some of our public safety pension liability. Okay. If that gets passed, then that money will be put towards the public safety liability, but it's only if that gets passed at the state level.
Okay, thank you.
And that's not being budgeted. No, because it's a contingent action of the state.
And that would be a positive benefit for Cottonwood.
Seems like a no-brainer. I think it made it out of committee like 8-1.
Oh, good.
Because they already allowed fire districts to do the same thing. They just didn't put municipalities in there, so we couldn't do it.
And then on the lease accounting, you have a footnote on your operating leases, and those are, there's been lease accounting has been around for a long time, and there's been a lot of abuse, not necessarily on the government side, but in the private sector side. So this standard 87 is really following the revisions in private sector, where there's been a lot of abuse in the use of off-balance sheet financing for leases and basically writing them such that they skirt the GASB or FASB issues and can be off-balance sheet debt of an entity and be pretty substantial. And so GASB kind of followed suit with that. You know, obviously, you're not entering into leasing activities for purposes of making a profit, and so it's a little less onus on a government to do this, but we do have some, you know, states will have issues with leases because they have substantial leases. But in your case, it's really taking a hard look at those operating leases and seeing if under the new rules, they're a capital lease. If they have certain terms of greater than 1 year, et cetera. And some of those are standard terms that were implemented previously. I don't sense that there's a ton of activity here. It's just an exercise that governments are going to need to go through to determine if anything needs to be brought. Another liability needs to be brought onto the books related to outstanding capital leases. So it's really looking at operating leases and saying, are these really a capital financing, a capital lease that needs to be on the books?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
That's it.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to make a comment and publicly thank Kirsten and team because I don't know if you caught those first couple of slides, but we had a clean audit with no findings, and I'll say it, and that's not universal, and that's not, it is an expectation, but it's not universal, and good job to the team, and I appreciate their hard work coming into this organization to start out with this kind of CAFR is great.
Very good.
Yeah, and I would like to thank everybody in the city. We go through various departments of the city and meet with people, and it's been a great place to do business, and everybody has been friendly and amenable to all of our requests, which are never easy to handle. We do a pretty deep review. You saw one slide of our approach, but Kirsten really feels that, and I thank her because she's been a great asset to us on the audit. It could be a much different situation.
Thank you.
I had a comment.
Yes,
You're ready
please.
for comments. And I wanted to echo what City Manager Corbin did say. I'm really glad that we were able to correct the 2 findings from the last audit. Thank you to everybody that made that happen. And I'm also glad that there were no material weaknesses identified this time. I think you've heard me say this before, our reserve levels give me heartburn, but I'm looking forward to next year's audit where we're working slowly on building up those reserve ratios. Right?
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, thanks for your time.
Yes, they need to.
Yes.
Thank you, and we'll need a motion to accept the CAFR.
I will motion then to accept the CAFR.
Second.
I want to leave that out this year.
Okay, Mayor made the motion, Vice Mayor seconded it. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Althouse.
Yes.
Councilmember Hulse.
Yes.
Councilmember Matthews.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Henry.
Yes.
Mayor Linsky.
Yes.
And motion carried.
All right. Very good. Thank you. We got you out of here on time to avoid the pending snowstorm, right? All right. Moving on then to item 2 under new business, we have ordinance number 660, amending Title V, business taxes, licenses, and regulations of the Cottonwood Municipal Code by deleting Chapter 5.17, mobile food vendors in its entirety, and adding a new Chapter 5.17, mobile vendors. Hello. Welcome back.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, Council. Ordinance number 660 is repeal and replacement of Chapter 5.17. In May of 2018, the state passed House Bill 2371 that restricted cities, towns, and counties' abilities to regulate mobile food vendors specifically. A lot of food trucks, what they can and can't do. So it made our current Chapter 5.17 not enforceable. So after 2 work sessions with the council, we worked on a couple different drafts on amending what we had with the option of having more requirements, more restrictions. However, council's direction was to take those out as it's not currently a problem. So the draft you have now is what you guys had liked at the January work session.
All right.
Questions?
Any questions from council to staff? No. Anybody here in the audience tonight have any questions? All right. We certainly went over this multiple times. I feel comfortable with what we've come up with and appreciate staff working with us on this. And I would be ready for a motion.
Oh, it's just first reading.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Then I'll just keep my mouth shut. I thought for sure as many times as we gone over it, we would.
One more time.
Okay, one more time. All right. All right. We won't surprise you then. Okay, first reading. Nothing required. So we'll move on then to item 3, which is a letter of support.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm so sorry. Yep. Thank you. Glad you're here tonight. Please read by title only ordinance number 660.
Ordinance number 660, an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Arizona, amending Title V, business taxes, license, and regulations of the Cottonwood Municipal Code by deleting Chapter 5.17, mobile food vendors in its entirety, and adding a new Chapter 5.17, mobile vendors. Mr. Mayor.
All right. Okay, next is letter of support for the Arizona Department of Transportation's infrastructure for Rebuilding America grant. Funding application for improvements to I-17 between Anthem and Sunset Point.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Robert Winnicky, City Engineer, Public Works Director. What I have for you tonight is a letter of support, consideration of it. I attended the NACOG Technical Subcommittee meeting on February 6th, and it was made notice to all the communities that ADA is looking at some funding for an improvement to I-17. And they're looking at about $130 million grant from this infra program through FHWA, which would help fund an improvement to I-17 to widen it between Anthem and Sunset Point. Granted, it doesn't get us all the way to us, but it does improve that corridor, and we know how viable it is to northern Arizona. So they've asked if we could submit a letter of support so they can submit it with their application.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, sooner the better.
I would say it's about time.
Yeah.
Okay. So I asked for a motion for you guys to approve the mayor to sign this letter.
I move to authorize the mayor or his authorized representative to issue a formal letter of support for the Arizona Department of Transportation's pursuit of the fiscal year 2019 INFRA grant for a proposed widening project of I-17 at Sunset Point.
Second.
Okay, Vice Mayor Henry made the motion and Councilmember Holst seconded it. All in, please take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Althouse.
Yes.
Councilmember Holst.
Yes.
Councilmember Matthews.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Henry.
Yes.
Mayor Linsky.
Yes.
And motion passed.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Who's my authorized representative? I'm just curious. I want to meet that person.
Anyone you authorize.
Oh, okay, great. I'm going to get on that then. All right, next up is item 4, discussion, consideration, and possible approval to issue a notice of intent to adopt new fee schedules for the city's building and safety division and fire and medical department. Evening.
Mayor, Council, in November, in the work session, we presented this schedule for you, and there were some comments and questions, and we studied those and presenting those back to you tonight first, then engineering, and I will be back with the planning and zoning. Here's Christina.
Very good.
Mr. Mayor, Council. So what I have today is the proposed revisions to the fee schedule for the Building and Safety Division. This was discussed back in April at a work session and then again in November for a work session. In the April work session, it was discussed to bring back a comparison where we showed like-for-like fees with our surrounding community, specifically being Sedona, Clarkdale, Camp Verde, and ourselves. And so that comparison report is provided since the April meeting and even since the November meeting. The surrounding jurisdictions have adopted other fees. We have a capacity fee that wasn't anticipated, I don't think, in the first go-around that we now have. So we really wanted to show you a line item by line item, like for like, of where we are in comparison to those other jurisdictions, and then to show the grand total with the miscellaneous fees that either we don't have, that other cities have, or that, or that vice versa. So this, and also in the April meeting, it was discussed that even though we presented you guys with a 75% recovery and 100% recovery, that the 100% recovery wasn't realistic, that we were really looking for more of the 75% recovery. So I am here for questions, comments.
Questions, comments?
I had a comment. I appreciated you including the information about the approximate hours it takes or staff time that we're actually expending. That was useful as far as reviewing the fee, the proposed increases, et cetera. So thank you, Christina.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you want a motion? Lost.
Yeah, if we're not, I mean, if there's no discussion, I know we've gone over this. I think Councilmember Holst may be the only one that didn't have an opportunity to discuss this during the work session, if I'm correct. So, not putting you in the spotlight, but just seeing if you have any.
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. And again, this is just keeping us in the running with all the other outlying communities.
And it's kind of bringing us a little bit more up to date. Our last fee increase was March 4th of 1997.
1997, you said?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, again, I don't want to update the fees just to be more in line with our neighboring communities, but my concern is that our fees are not covering even close to the cost of providing the services, and that to me is a compelling reason to adjust these fees. Not, again, I don't have any problem, especially where a stated concern of ours is trying to promote builders and growth and workforce housing and all the things that we just discussed at our strategic planning retreat. But again, where we're losing significant amounts because of our outdated fee schedule, I can actually get on board and support them.
I agree, and I think we're looking to get more aligned with the other communities too in our building codes and everything else that we've adopted. So I think it's important that there be some consistency across the valley.
And council, if you would, the manager just made a good point. When you give your direction, please specify the cost recovery or whatever set of proposed fees you want us to publish the notice of intent and tee it up for.
Can you say that again? I wasn't following you, I'm sorry.
Christina was mentioning that she prepared 75% cost recovery schedule, 100%. We just want to be clear that your direction, you know, I think it's pretty clear on the record what staff's recommendation is, but let's follow that all the way through.
And are you meaning in the motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry for being obtuse. I didn't follow that.
So if we could then just talk about where this goes from here. Of course, this is a notice of intent, so then there'll be a public hearing after this where we can get feedback from the community and builders and homeowners and everybody, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, again, it'll be published. We'll have to publish so that everybody knows there's going to be a public hearing. There'll be plenty of time for that. And then there'll be 2 readings, initial reading and then a final reading.
We can do this by resolution or by ordinance. Okay. You can have it done by 1 reading. I know a lot of communities, once they start catching up and do this a little more often than every 20 years, it's an annual process and it's incremental, and it doesn't mean that the fees necessarily change, but some fees every year are going to change. So you'll do it as an annual resolution cycle.
Right. Okay.
So where does this put us currently in cost recovery?
This will put us at a 75% cost recovery for just the building and safety division. I know fire fees are included in that, but this isn't a recovery cost for the fire department.
Okay. Is that pretty standard?
It's very standard in building and safety to do the recovery in this manner. They have it in a publication in the International Code Council. They send a publication out. They show people how to do these multipliers that you need to have if you want to do cost recovery. And then they do 2 publications a year with cost per square footage updates depending on where the economy is. And they don't just base it off of one area. They do a general area overall. So when you're adopting your cost per square foot, it could drop next year. It could drop, or it could go up, cost per square foot. So that's actually printed and published by them, and that's up to you, the council, to adopt those on either an annual basis.
Okay, thanks.
And I like that suggestion. I do think that we should be looking at it, annually.
Yeah.
And personally, I'm comfortable with the 75%. I don't know, obviously how the rest of council feels for this particular, the first set of numbers.
Yep. See how it works. If we're going to do it annually, then we can increase it if necessary.
Agreed. All right. I'd entertain a motion.
I'm not exactly sure where to stick the 75%, but I will attempt it. I like it better when we have a blank spot and it's insert here, just for staff's future reference. All right, I move to direct staff to prepare a notice of intent proposing new fee schedules at 75% recovery for the city's building and safety and fire and medical departments for public hearing, discussion, and possible adoption by the city council at a future meeting.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Althouse made the motion and Matthews seconded it. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Althouse?
Yes.
Councilmember Halls?
Yes.
Councilmember Matthews?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Henry?
Yes.
Mayor Linsky?
Yes.
And motion carried.
All right, very good. Thank you. Okay, next up is proposed revisions to the city's engineering fee schedule.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Again, Robert Winnicky, City Engineer. Here tonight to talk to you about increasing our fees for engineering. It's kind of a common theme. We've heard from building and inspection. It's been about 20 years, a little over that, to do theirs. I have 3 primary fees: my plan review fee, my inspection review fee, and my right-of-way permit fee. 2 of those, the plan review and inspection review, were established in 1998 and haven't been touched since. And the right-of-way permit's been established in 2000, and again, same trend, no changes. Looking at basically inflating those over inflation just to see what that would do to us. For the plan review fee, that would put from currently at $125 a sheet to $225 a sheet, and the inspection sheet from $250 to $451 a sheet. So obviously, we're a little behind. Same thing if we look at the right-of-way permit fee. Currently, we charge $40, and if we inflated that to today, again, assuming 3% inflation, we're looking at about $68. So we're behind a little bit today. What I'm proposing is we increase our fees to go ahead and try to recoup a little bit of that cost to come back to what inflation would put us at. In the packet, I put together basically 2 sheets. One is a overall fee schedule. We found in going through this that some of the things that we provide in engineering and public works, we don't charge for, like putting up banners. So we don't have any staff time recovered, equipment time or fuel, anything like that. So it makes sense to try and get some sort of a cost established so we can charge that to people. As well as, you know, when we're doing engineering plan reviews, we don't have a specific fee for studies, reports. If the public wants a study done to put in a speed bump or something in their neighborhood, we have no way to recoup any, you know, staff time. You know, we've got a number of departments that work on these, so we're trying to at least get a nominal fee to help cover some of that, because it is things that we go ahead and provide, but we don't go ahead and, you know, recoup much cost for that, or any cost in some instances. So we went ahead and looked at 7 different communities, I believe it is, throughout the Verde Valley and a couple down in Phoenix, just to get an idea as to where our fees, you know, currently stand and how they might look, you know, if we raise them. Well, you know, we'll find a common trend that when you're trying to compare these, you're looking at bananas and, you know, cherries. You know, they don't match, obviously. Some people don't charge for certain things because they're incorporated into some other fees. So on the spreadsheet that we put together, there's a lot of NAs, and that's basically saying that when you see that fee, that community doesn't charge something. That's exactly what we're looking at there. So we went back through, tried to go ahead and come up with a fair assessment of the fees and what we feel could at least help bring us semi-current and not necessarily say we're going to be overcharging people compared to the surrounding communities. So I have the fee schedule in here, which is requesting that we increase the plan review fee from $125 to $300 a sheet. The inspection sheet from $250, we'll actually drop that to $200 per sheet. And we kind of looked at some numbers that we went ahead and did this past year. And if we did those changes, that would take our increase. We would increase our revenue by just under $5,800 to the general fund. And then if we go ahead and do the right-of-way permits, we're going from, we did 17 last year. We'd have $20 additional, that'd be $340. So it's not a huge increase, doesn't cover staff time by any means, but it does go ahead and at least give us a little bit extra to contribute. And then one other thing to add, there is, on this sheet, there are 2 fees for the fire department. One is a blasting permit, and the other is an annual storage fee for their explosives. And fire departments set those at $75 and $200 respectively.
So I'm sorry, can you go into a little bit more detail on that one, blasting and explosives storage?
Those ones would probably be better to have. Right?
I don't see a change on those.
Right, yeah, no. So they're just in there.
Okay.
But they are included under engineering, not under building inspection. So,
But that has to do with our fire department?
yes, it is.
Okay, got it. All right. Any questions from council?
I actually have a question on the next one, the street and pole banners.
Okay.
Is that, I'm assuming it's just if you put banners on the street, not directly on a building?
Yes, correct.
So if you own the building and you want to put a banner on your building, no problem?
Right, yes. This would be in anything that falls inside the right of way.
Okay.
So then in city-sponsored events, does the city then pay that fee?
The fee would actually be waived for city events, as well as nonprofits.
Okay. And then I had a question on the couple items under engineering and inspection.
Sure.
Traffic calming study on local streets.
Yes, sir.
We don't currently charge for that?
That is correct, $0.
So who pays for that?
Basically, the way the policy is written right now is we'll get a resident, they'll come in and they'll go ahead and ask for the study to be done. And basically it requires a speed study, traffic survey, and then they go ahead and, once we have that information, we see if it's even a candidate. Then they would go ahead and go petition all the neighbors to go ahead and see if there's majority support to actually put those in. And then at that time, they are responsible for paying for that speed bump, so that fee would be charged at that point in time.
But only after the study that's completed warrants.
Yeah, correct, exactly.
So they wouldn't be charged. So if you're just a nice neighbor who wants to help your neighborhood out, you're not going to get throw a credit card down to lodge a. No, okay, all right. Just making sure.
No, that's fair.
Okay, and then the holiday hours inspection. Do we inspect during holidays?
There are some holidays where contractors are working where the city is not. So in that case, most of the time they coordinate it where they don't have to do that. But if that were to happen, this is just a mechanism to have that available.
Okay.
President's Day would probably be a good example.
Right.
Some of us still have to work.
Yes, all right. And then the outside consultant fee, that's as determined by city staff if you need to bring in an outside consultant?
Correct, yes, exactly.
Okay.
Since I've been here, the ones we did were for 89 and Vine, which is that subdivision, obviously going by Cornville and 89A. And that's just, we didn't have the availability on staff at that time to do it, so.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? No. Seems reasonable.
Yeah. I'd like a little more clarification on the traffic calming study.
Sure.
It's not just for speed bumps, it's if they request a stop sign or, let's see, what else? Noise complaints?
Yes, you're reading footnote number 5 there, sir?
Yes.
Yes, correct. Basically, again, if we're going to do a stop sign, we have to go out and do speed limit or traffic counts, speed studies, see what the existing is, talk to the police department, find out what accidents they've had or any other types of complaints. So this is just, again, one of those things that when it comes time to do, we would try to capture that fee before the sign actually got implemented.
Just a real world kind of a comparison. So the recent deal over on Cove Parkway with that intersection, would that fall under this fee in the future?
If we were to implement the sign, yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So if this was implemented, the citizen wants this done, what you did for her and checking that out,
yes,
would have to pay that fee first?
We would like to get that fee paid, yes.
And that would also include if neighborhood were to complain about speeders?
Did I put that in there?
This is for speed complaints.
Yeah, the speed complaint one I think might be a little bit extreme for that.
Okay, yeah.
So, I mean, I can strike that, that's fine.
Okay.
We have a few of those come up.
Yeah, I live in one.
Just for clarification, that footnote 5 in the that's actually if there's a study done.
Right.
So can you maybe my understanding of a study isn't what really happens.
Okay.
What happens when you do a traffic calming study?
When I do a traffic calming study, I get the request from a citizen, and then we go out and we set up our traffic counters, we go ahead and collect the traffic data. We also talk to the police department so they can go ahead and do a speed study for us. We can do that with our traffic counters, but it's good to have that redundant information, just so that way that you jive. Basically, so they'll put up a little radar out there, and they just catch the data for us, and we get a whole week's worth. Go ahead and get it back, and we compare it, see how things are looking. Then we go ahead and compare that to the criteria that we've established. We've got probably a list of about 12 different items that people, or that have to qualify to make this work. So if the street's a certain length, if it's a dead-end street, if there's, businesses and other things that are on there, all that gets looked at, and then a report gets generated based on all those findings. And then once we have all those findings together, then we go back to the resident that made the request and say, okay, this is what we found. It looks like it warrants it or it doesn't. And if it does warrant it, the next step is you have to go get a petition signed by 51% of your neighbors. And from there, if they get that, then they have to go ahead and pay the fee to put in the traffic hump or speed bumps. And then that has to all be paid before we put it in.
Okay, so it's a lot more detailed than
It
just a
is.
speeding, I call and there's a complaint because somebody's speeding.
Yeah, there's a little bit more work that goes into it than that.
Just to play devil's advocate, in a situation where, Mrs. Citizen does identify something, it's an unsafe condition, she wants it studied, we study it, city determines, yeah, there ought to be a stop sign there because it's an unsafe condition. And for the low, low price of $150, we'll go ahead and install that. I mean, aren't we somehow liable for going ahead and studying a potentially dangerous situation and not correcting it?
Yeah, we would have some liability if we didn't correct the dangerous situation, yes. Steve, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I'd qualify that. That's pretty limited. There's immunities available under state law for the kinds of decisions and determinations you make about expending resources and the projects you undertake, knowing that you can't predict and do everything.
Just seems like more often than not, we might just be waiving that fee just to make sure that we corrected an unsafe condition, right?
You certainly have that prerogative.
Mr. Mayor, if I can add, I'd be happy to relook at that fee. The more I hear it talked about, the more concerned I am about it. It is a lot of work on my engineer that we have. The city has one engineer, and there's a lot of work by the police department that goes into these studies. So I understand the desire to recoup a little bit of that, but I don't, staff may disagree with me on this one, but I don't necessarily want to try to urge people not to report what they consider safety issues or problems. It's part of our job and our responsibility. And again, with a speed bump in a neighborhood, I get that, how having them maybe pay for that, but a stop sign in a business district, it might be a little more different. Might be different. So let us regroup on that one fee, if you don't mind, and we'll have a better recommendation for you at the NOI, at the hearing.
Right, and I'm not opposed to trying to recoup some of the cost, of course, but it certainly seems like there might be some situations where we just want to go ahead and remedy this.
Sure. No, I agree. And I agree with the city manager Corbin's opinion there. So I think that's definitely something to look at.
Okay.
And frankly, I think I don't think it's necessarily a binary choice, Mayor and Council. I think you can adopt these fees, and then we're not so large a community that, a particular issue might come before you, and you might decide to authorize a calming control or something to be done, or the police department can make a recommendation. So there's not just one door in here.
Right.
So we can waive it if it has merit?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Everything else look good? Yeah, okay. Okay, I'll go ahead and move then to direct staff to prepare, post, and publish a notice of intent to adopt the proposed new engineering fee schedule for public hearing, discussion, and possible adoption by the City Council at a future meeting.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion, Councilmember Hulse seconded it. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Althouse?
Yes.
Councilmember Hulse?
Yes.
Councilmember Matthews?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Henry?
Yes.
Mayor Linsky?
Yes.
And motion carried.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, last on the agenda tonight is a proposed revision of the fee schedule for the city's Planning and Zoning Division. Welcome back.
Mayor Castle, again, you have seen these fees before, but we just rearranged it a little bit and shortened like for like with other cities, and also only the ones we are recommending increase. So those are the ones we brought back. And also, last meeting in November, there was a discussion, a detailed discussion actually, and temporary use permits and special use permits, special event permits actually. And so those are the ones was discussed. We were recommending only 50 for TUP and 100 for SEP. We went and tiered them, and commercial, city-sponsored, and tax-exempt ones. And after some discussions, we are recommending now $0 for those tax-exempt nonprofit organization events. So this is the biggest change in this schedule since the last meeting.
So I have a question on that. On the proposed, On the attachment that says current proposed fees, I believe it is, yeah. You have, on that sheet, you have for the tax exempt, you have $50 waivable by city council, but on the other sheet, you have 0, and you just said 0. So what is?
Yeah, you're talking about, not about the spreadsheet, right?
I'm talking about the white one.
White one. Let's leave that one to the last, because this is working sheet. Whatever we decide on this one tonight, that's going to be approved in the final stage.
But they'll match?
It is gonna match, because that is not reflecting the changes we are proposing.
Okay, all right, because that's what was confusing, so I was waiting for you to say it. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Althouse, we've debated this back and forth and trying to figure out special exemptions and laying out a big process. We thought, let's just do a blanket exception for nonprofits. So we failed to update the white sheet, which will be what you'll approve in a month or so. But we will, our staff's recommendation, if you move forward with this, would be to keep that at 0.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Everything seemed to fall in line with what we had discussed, and sensing a little maybe no coming from my right.
No, I'm okay.
Okay. I wanted to talk just a little bit about is it under this? No, I'm not seeing it now. The fee for multifamily residential, does that fall under this? I'm not seeing it right now.
This would be, yes, there was a discussion on that in previous meeting, and I guess you were recommending that to consider multifamily as a residential fees, but when you look at it with the ICC, with the building code and also zoning code, residential, single family versus multifamily, they are treated differently.
Okay.
So multifamily really falls into commercial, so we couldn't separate that.
So what's the threshold there? Is it, are townhomes 4 units? Can they be up to 4?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. 4 is the multifamily.
And that would still be residential?
Pardon?
Would that still be considered residential, 4-unit townhome?
Yes, multifamily, but the rules are close to commercial that time. It's not like single family residential fees don't apply.
So then, to be clear, so a 4-unit townhome would be charged the same as a commercial?
You are talking about building permits, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That was with you, sorry.
So the reason why you would get a conditional use permit for a multifamily is if you were locating that multifamily unit in a commercial zone.
Got it.
So when you do that, the zoning is now commercial and you're changing it to residential. Most multifamily, you can place multifamily without ever using this use permit in any residential zone that allows multifamily as a permitted use.
Okay.
It's only when it's a conditional use, and the only area in our code that allows for the conditional use for multifamily is in our C1, C2 zones.
Okay.
But your question is more for the building permits then?
Yeah, my angle here is just to make sure that we encourage higher density. I think we're all concerned about affordability of our housing, and so I just don't want to. I'd like to, incentivize and encourage higher density to make sure that we get closer to that affordability margin. I certainly wouldn't want to penalize anyone for trying to build something that gets us closer.
Again, if it is the approved zone, allowed zone, they have the right. They just directly go to building permit.
Right.
But like Christina was saying, if it is not allowed use in that zone, then they have to go through the conditional permit. But it's not a difficult process either.
Okay.
And for building permitting, just so you know, for building permitting, it's still, you have the ICC for 1 and 2 family residences, and then you're in the IBC, which is the International Building Code, for anything over two or more. So you are.
2 family and then 3 or more is in the international.
Right. So your cost per square foot on multifamily is going to be different than a single family, and that's going to be handled in the building permitting side. So yeah, it can be more because again, it's not looked at as a low density residential. It's high density. So there is a difference in those fees for building, but this is planning, and these are just use permits.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Good call.
Anything else?
I move to direct staff to prepare, post, and publish a notice of intent proposing a new planning and zoning fee schedule for public hearing, discussion, and possible adoption by the city council at a future meeting.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Alhouse made the motion and Matthews seconded it. And Deputy Clerk, please take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Althouse.
Yes.
Councilmember Holtz.
Yes.
Councilmember Matthews.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Henry.
Yes.
Mayor Linsky.
Yes.
And motion carried.
All right, thank you. Three for three. Okay, now it's claims and adjustments. I move that we pay the claims.
Second.
Okay, so Mayor made the motion, Councilmember Holmes seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Vice Mayor made the motion, Councilmember House seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.